All right, we're going to pull back the curtain on cyber attacks. We're not just looking at how they happen, but the entire anatomy of the defense that's designed to stop them.
You know, it's the first thing you think of when you see another big data breach in the news. You picture this lone genius in a dark room, a blur of code on the screen, and then, bam, they're in. But the reality? It's way more methodical than that. It's less of a lightning strike and a lot more like a carefully planned heist. You know, a deliberate chain of events, all designed to find one single crack in the armor. So in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow that playbook. We'll trace the entire anatomy of an attack, from the very first whisper of reconnaissance all the way to the final defensive response. It really is a constant game of cat and mouse. Okay, so every single attack, and I mean every attack, starts right here. Before an attacker can even think about breaking in, they have to do their homework. They have to case the digital joint. In the cybersecurity world, we call this reconnaissance. It is pure information gathering. Attackers are basically looking for digital weak points. What systems are you running? What services are exposed to the internet? It's all about one question. Are there any doors or windows left unlocked? And reconnaissance really comes in two main flavors. You've got active scanning, using a tool like Nmap, which is loud. It's literally like walking up to a building and rattling every single doorknob to see if one is open. But then there's passive sniffing with something like Wireshark. That's totally silent. It's like sitting in a car across the street, just watching, learning the building's routines without ever touching it. All right, so once the attacker has their map of the target, it's time to actually forge the keys. They take all that intelligence they gathered and start crafting the specific tools they'll need for the break-in. And this right here is the weaponization phase. This is that critical prep stage where an attacker, who's found a potential weak spot, builds the specific exploit, that custom key to take advantage of it. A perfect example of this is a DDoS attack. It doesn't just happen. An adversary first has to build their weapon. In this case, that weapon is a botnet, which is basically an army of compromised computers. That whole assembly process, that is weaponization. Reconnaissance, done. Weapon, built. Now, it's the moment of truth, the initial breach. This is where the attacker crosses that digital threshold from the outside world and gets into the target system. And you know, a surprisingly common way in is an attack called directory traversal. It's a simple but really effective trick where the attacker fools a web server into letting them walk up and out of the folder they're supposed to be in. This gives them access to parts of the system that should be totally off limits. See that simple ... on the screen? That is the whole key. In system commands, it just means go up one directory. So by stringing a bunch of them together, an attacker is trying to climb out of the web folder to grab a really sensitive file, like the /etc/password file on a Linux system, which holds user account info. So the big question, right? How do you stop this? Well, the defense is something called server-side input validation. Basically, the server's code has to be smart enough to look at that input, recognize those / characters for what they are, malicious, and just say, nope, you're not allowed to do that. It's like having a security guard who checks everyone's ID at the door. Simple, but effective. But here's the thing, getting in, that's just step one. A real, successful compromise isn't some smash and grab. It's the beginning of a much longer operation. And now, the attacker's malware needs to establish a connection back to its master. And this leads to a classic sign that security analysts are always hunting for. It's called beaconing. It's the malware calling home for instructions. If you're watching the network, you'll see traffic leaving at these very regular intervals, like every minute or every hour, on the dot, to the same place. It's a dead giveaway that something is very wrong. So when a defender spots that beaconing, they don't just shut it down. No, they start playing detective. And they use a framework like the diamond model to piece the whole story together. Who is the adversary? What infrastructure? What tools are they using? What are their capabilities? And why us? Answering these questions turns a simple alert into intelligence you can actually use. Okay, the attack is detected, alarms are blaring. Now the defense team kicks into high gear, shifting from monitoring to active response. And this isn't chaos, not at all. It's a structured, disciplined process. And this is their playbook, the incident response lifecycle. It moves methodically. It starts with detection. Then you go straight to containment. You've got to stop the bleeding. After that comes eradication, getting the threat out for good. Then full recovery.
But the cycle finishes with maybe the most critical step of all, lessons learned, so you can make sure this never, ever happens again.
But how do you actually know if your defense is any good? I mean, really? Well, you can't manage what you don't measure. And that's where key performance indicators, or KPIs, come in. They provide the hard data to prove what's working and what isn't.
The first big one is MTTD, mean time to detect. To put it simply, how long is an attacker just hanging out in our network before we even have a clue they're there? The goal here is obvious. Get that number as low as possible.
And the second one is MTTR, mean time to respond. Okay, so the alarm goes off. How fast can we actually shut down the threat and get back to normal? Together, these two numbers, how fast you spot them and how fast you stop them, are the ultimate scorecard for any security team.
So you see, this whole thing, it's a constant cycle. The attacker probes, the defender hardens. The attacker finds one little flaw, the defender has to patch it. It's this relentless, nonstop chess match between offense and defense. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, first, attacks aren't just random chaos. They're a structured process. And because they're a process, every single tactic has a defensive counter. This means that having a disciplined response, one that's driven by clear metrics, isn't just a good idea. It's the only way you can effectively minimize the damage.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty heavy thought. The attacker has a huge advantage. They only need to be right once. The defender has to be right every single time. So with that in mind, what do you think is the one defensive layer, whether it's technology, a process, or the people, that an organization absolutely cannot afford to get wrong?